Hello everyone, this is CA Mansi Vohra on behalf of CA Sansaar, and today on this International Women's Day, we are going to organize a webinar on prevention of sexual harassment. Today we have with us CA Ritu Gupta, who is Vice President MAS Times Group, and she is also a member of Delhi Chapter Women's Circle of Institute of Internal Auditors. So I would like to welcome, please, CA Ritu ma'am.
Thank you, Mansi.
Also, we have with us CA Baqai, who is President, Institute of Internal Auditors, Delhi Chapter Women's Circle. Please welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Mansi.
Now, I would request CA Baqai to please give a brief introduction to our topic on POSH.
Hello, everyone. Today, I wish all the women a very happy Women's Day. And I'm thankful to CA Sansaar to think about organizing the session on prevention of sexual harassment. It was legally introduced in 2013, but however, I have seen that the knowledge about this act is very less. People are not aware about the rights. All the women's actually do not, they don't have the information what they can do at the workplace. So the prevention of sexual harassment has been legally enforced through the act.
That is Prevention of Sexual Harassment, Prohibition and Deterrence Act,
Yes.
2013, which primarily came into place with the Vishakha guidelines.
You're right. So this act contains effectively three parts: the prevention, prohibition, and redressal. All the three aspects for this is covered. So what is important is sexual harassment of women at workplace. Sexual harassment and sexual harassment at workplace are two different aspects. So when we are talking about this act, it talks about the define what is employee, what is employer, and the workplace. This act is applicable to all the organization, be it an NGO, society, trust, company, private, public organization, which is having more than 10 employees in their organization.
I think one of the important point which is also relevant here is that it's more than 10 employees in an organization, but it's at all the branches, respective branches of an organization, and irrespective of whether you have a women employee or not a women employee. So it is mandatory for organizations to set up a committee and have these guidelines in place if you have more than 10 employees, irrespective of the gender.
Yes. So it applies also to the places where there is not even a single woman is working.
Yeah.
So it is an apprehension that this act will apply only to the organization where women are working. So prevention is that the employer has to made a policy, the procedure, how the this prevention of the sexual harassment policy will
basically,
work
I
in
think,
their
Sana, I
organization.
would just like to add here the companies may need to define and lay down the POSH policy within the organization, which should be primarily based on your law.
Yes.
Okay, that policy needs to be rolled out to all employees. And the employee should be made aware of the policy either through trainings, through the posters, through the displays, etc. Because there needs to be creating that awareness within the organization.
Yes,
Right.
True. So, ma'am, what about the organizations which are having less than 10 employees? So, what about that?
So when it comes to the organization which does not have 10 employees, they can either voluntarily opt for it.
Okay.
And if they are not opting voluntarily, they do not have any policy in place, then there is a concept of a legal committee, which is created by the district magistrate.
Okay.
जो भी आपके एरिया का डिस्ट्रिक्ट मजिस्ट्रेट है उसके अंडर में एक लोकल कमेटी फॉर्म होती है अंडर दिस एक्ट.
Okay.
So when the local committee is formed, an employee who is working in an organization, in a small organization, they can approach them directly.
See, there is also a she box, which is a government initiative which works. So, an employee who is facing such kind of an harassment can obviously refer back to the Vishaka guidelines and the Act.
Okay.
And they can approach the local committees set up by the government, or raise their complaints to the this she box, where it is redressed by the government.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Let's proceed further.
Yes. So when it comes to the prevention, yes, the policies has to be there. The prohibition, of course, the training part, which is important, and definition of the sexual harassment, that what is prohibited. The awareness for that is really important. As far as the law is concerned, it says these 5 things constitute sexual harassment. First is physical contact and advances, a demand or request for sexual favors, making sexually colored remarks, showing pornography, or any other unwelcome physical, verbal, or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature. So this constitute sexual harassment as per the definition given in the Act. However, the interpretation of all these is actually a challenging task. Ritu
Yes.
can throw more light on this.
So basically, I think if you see this act, this is based on the not the intention of the respondent. Okay, it is how the remarks has been interpreted by the complainant. So, for example, if I call you a darling, okay, the other person may not like it. I will say I have told you casually, right? But it's not your intention which matters. It is the receiver's perception of what he or she had received. That is important. So I think effectively in an organization, we should ensure that we remain confined in our official parameters, right? So effectively, just sexually coloring remarks to somebody, some special preferential treatment to the employees because it's happening because of sexual references. Because effectively, I think the supervisor and the employee relationship, the onus obviously remains on the super. When you are in a position of power, okay, the comments becomes all the more relevant in the sense that it is always, because an employee as a junior level is always finding it difficult to say no. Okay, so I think as a supervisor, it is important that we need to be all careful on the way we deal with employees. True. And the way, so any explicit preferential treatment, interference in the work, or creating a very offensive environment within the organization, or let's say I'm commenting about your behavior to somebody else. Okay, that's also in a way is a sexual harassment because I'm trying to put you down.
Yeah.
So the next aspect which is important is, so if such kind of activities has occurred, what are the rights available to the women? So this law also prescribes what can happen. So there should be a internal committee which has to be formed by the employer, and it constitute 4 members, and half of them should be at least women.
So, Sana, I would like to just add in here. So, basically, the committee can have as many members as possible, whatever they require. The committee needs to be chaired by a senior women employee in an organization.
Yes.
That is clarity completely there. So, there has to be minimum, as she said, 4 employees in the committee. So, out of which the majority has to be women. Okay. And the committee also needs to have a lawyer on the board, an NGO representative who has reasonable years of experience.
Right.
Because I think for the reference of everyone, listeners out there, POSH is a legal law, right? And the proceedings which are conducted under POSH, they are actually a civil procedure which is being conducted. So the committee is set up, which is chaired by the employee of the organization. Ideally, it should have a male member also, because from the context of the completeness perspective.
Right.
But the majority has to be women, and also supported by a women lawyer. or an NGO she has to be a lawyer from an
Yes.
independent perspective.
It has the one member, at least one member should be a external to the organization. You cannot have all the internal members in that committee,
Right.
right? So that person can be a lawyer as an NGO, as Ritu just mentioned.
This is really a vital part for being independent committee.
Exactly.
Yes.
It ensures that
ensures independence.
independence.
Yes. So one, it ensures independence. Another, since we said it's a legal law, it's a law which has a lot of legal implications around it. So that also ensures that there is a neutrality as well as the applicability and compliance of the law, which is ensured from a company's perspective.
Yes. So when it comes to the next aspect, how the complaints can be made and the procedure which happens. So if any women which faces such kind of issues in their organization, they can approach the internal committee within 3 months of the incidents. Although this 3 month can be extended up to 6 months if any valid explanation for the delay is there.
Yes.
So whenever somebody feels that any incident, such kind of activity had happened with her, the women themselves can also approach, and somebody else on behalf of the aggrieved women can also approach the committee.
So here, I think normally most companies who have a POSH policy, they generally create a mail ID wherein the complainant can raise a complaint, because that access is available. I think one of the most important part in the whole process is the confidentiality in the whole process.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think being women, etc., we are all there. But I think once you start working in an organization, you are new to the setup, you are not very sure of your actions of what you do, and if you say negatively, whether it's taken against you, etc. So I think it takes a lot of gut for a woman to speak up. We all say that it's so easy to go and speak to the supervisor. So the women can raise a complaint to the HR, to the immediate supervisor, or to the complaints committee. But at the same time, I think they all are required to refer the case to the committee. Okay. And the choice to go ahead primarily lies with the women, because once a woman comes in, it's generally asked that whether you would like to lodge an official complaint to the committee. So that right is available with the complainant.
So once the complaint is received by the committee, then it is the committee which actually first they try to initiate the conciliation between the aggrieved women.
So basically, there are two processes, Sana. When a complainant raises a complaint, either through HR or through the supervisor, they in turn take it back to the IC, okay, which is an internal committee. Now, as a law, you are supposed to offer both the methods to the complainant.
Right.
One is a conciliatory mechanism, and another is a full-blown investigation.
Yes.
Now, so that choice has to be made by the complainant. Okay. In the conciliatory mechanism, what happens is the IC will speak to the complainant, will speak to the respondent, and will seek an apology for an action done by the respondent if complainant agrees to go for the conciliatory process. So in that process, they don't go out to seek for witnesses and other details, etc. And ideally, that process should complete within 15 days.
The conciliation process has to finish within 15 days. Yes.
And generally, once the committee completes the complaint, they have to report the findings to both complainant as well as the respondent.
Right. So alternatively, apart from conciliation, the other process is to go into the formal inquiry.
Yeah.
In the inquiry part, the committee has to undergo the inquiry and finish it within 90 days of receiving the complaint.
Yes.
The process is that once the inquiry has been initiated, it has to be finished within 90 days. And the next step is that within 10 days of finishing the inquiry, they have to report it to the employer. And next 60 days is given to the employer to take an action on the finding of the committee.
So basically, I think...
so it's a process of 90 plus 10 plus 60 days.
Yeah.
So it's a long process if somebody wants to get into the formal inquiry.
Yes.
Versus the conciliation process, which is just a 15 days.
So conciliatory is a short mechanism. So, for example, a group of people, if they're sitting together and somebody raises or puts up a very colored remark in the whole process, some people may not find it comfortable to hear that remark. Okay.
Right.
Or maybe you've touched a certain person and he's not liking the touch which you have done. So they will go back to the committee. But it's not a repeat offense which a person is regularly doing, or it was just of a, but the person complainant has not taken it nicely. So what basically happens is at that time, if the committee tells them that, would you like to seek an apology from a respondent?
Yeah.
Or do you think so? If complainant believes, the conciliatory works in that process. Otherwise, if it believes that yes, there's more to the whole scenario and there has been a repetitive thing, the person has sent lots of social media messages or some WhatsApp, etc., or has tried to basically put that person down in front of other people, then they can go for full blown inquiry.
Yeah.
And obviously, the law defines various timelines in between. So I think effectively we have the laws available for everyone to read into the process.
Right.
But it says within receiving complaint, within 7 days, you respond back to respondent, to say response to the complainant, form a committee internally. If it's a large organization, you will have much more members on the committee. So you decide which 4 members will conduct the inquiry. But yes, the chairman and the legal representative remain static. So they obviously has to be a part of the committee. And then there are sub-step process. And even the complainant, the complaint which has been raised has to be formally shared with the respondent for him to respond back on each of the pointers.
Right.
And I think the other important parameter is anything which gets discussed in the committee or with the complainant or the respondent, there's a complete confidentiality requirement, both from the committee perspective as well as from the complainant or the respondent perspective.
Because still, in fact of introduction of this act, complainant are having fear of being exposed or this. So confidentiality is the main
Right.
plays a very vital role in this.
And I think the other important factor is both are given an equal opportunity to represent their case. Because I think sometimes we see cases where the complainant wants in the very first day what would be the outcome, right? So I think the committee also needs to refrain, because effectively it's only a complaint. Now finally whether it will turn out to be true or false, the committee doesn't know. So I think the law purely talks about natural justice, where both are given equal opportunity to present their witnesses, present their statements, counter the statements. So there is a non-counter process where everybody has the right to speak up and then get clear understanding of how it is happening.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
So as you just mentioned, the malicious complaints are also there, right?
It does happen. So I see effectively there is a difference in the two also, Sana.
Yeah.
Because whether it's malicious or whether it was not intended that way.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So sometime I think malicious would be completely that, this is basically a law based on certain behaviors. Okay, a certain behavior. Most of the time, I think it's very difficult to really, because we are not the lawyer, police, or somebody who's investigating the timing, exact recurrence of everything. What you're trying is you're comprehending whether that event could have happened. Even if it could have happened, I think the benefit is still given to the complainant. Okay. So in the real sense, it may not be malicious, but yes, it may not be that intent with which the respondent would have said, or there could be a little misunderstanding between the two. So I think normally in that case, it may not prove to be correct, in the sense that sometime I think if she's raised 3-4 issues around, you may say, okay, 2 may have happened, 1 may not have happened. Okay, whether you call it true or false, it still has some connotation of what has happened, right?
Right.
So I think that becomes a little difficult. And
interpretation of what has actually happened becomes a very
questionable part. It's a questionable part, right? So For example, I think in one of the situations, a person had a habit of the guy had a habit of singing or humming into the office. Okay, so he will tap the floor and sing generally because he was a good singer. He used to sing a lot of religious songs.
Okay.
And the girl felt no that he's singing primarily for me. Okay.
That's
And so basically that's a perception she got.
Mhm.
But I think when you speak to multiple people, when you speak to, but like, at the same time, you caution the respondent that office is office, right? You are not supposed to sing.
right.
You maintain the official decorum. Now, here it's a very, very thin line. What it's not sexual harassment, but the person felt uncomfortable that he's singing song looking at me or trying to look at me or trying to intimidate me. So I think it's a very difficult question to answer at times, Sana.
Exactly. So it happens that the intention is different and the perception is different.
Yeah, but the whatever you say, the law is still based on the perception of the complainant. So here, I think effectively now there are reasons or requirements, but it's primarily by perception, and that's why I think for all the male colleagues also into the forum that we have, I think it's important that we run through the law. We should see what is acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable
Exactly.
behavior.
Absolutely.
I think that's
That's
a thin line which we should be clear.
That is the only reason that law has prescribed the punishment for the malicious complaints as well. So since it is based on perception, they always try to make the difference between the two, right? So there's a punishment for malicious complaints as well.
The other thing is that effectively, when a complaint is raised in the system, the committee should offer, the committee has to take some interim measures. So, once the complainant has decided that she wants to get into a full complaint process, there is a few preventive measures. So, basically, if they're into a reporting relationship, you change the reporting relationship during the time the investigation is on
Right.
to create that comfort for the complainant. If the complainant is not still happy working into the office or is uncomfortable because of the presence of the respondent, the law allows leaves to be offered to the complainant, which will be with pay.
Right.
Okay, so the complainant can go on leave during the process, or if they believe respondent needs to go on leave, use. So there has to be some interim measures so that there is a fairness into the whole trial process. Because if I've raised a complaint for my supervisor, I won't be reporting to him when the investigation is on.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so I think that's an important aspect, because you change the reporting or change the location, or if the he or she wants a leave during the process, that is also offered by the committee.
Exactly. So there is a option that somebody who has initiated the complaint and want to get into the formal inquiry and everything. One of the measure is compensation as well. Right.
Yes, there is a measure of compensation, but I think effectively, in my experience, I think the compensation bit becomes a little difficult. It's very difficult. So compensation in the sense that, one, obviously you have put the person under leave for some time, let's say, but it's with pay.
Okay.
So it's not treated as a leave. Okay. So you are given leave with pay. It is more to ensure your safety and comfort, if you want, because you
Right.
feel very uncomfortable working in the same scenario.
Right.
So effectively, I think, except in a very bigger cases, and at the same time, I think here, if you look at it, the complainant can go to the internal committee. They can parallelly go to the police if they want.
Okay.
They can go to the government, so they can have a parallel three-way process at the same time.
Okay.
So there are a lot of rights available to a complainant. If or let's say, for example, you have case of stalking. Now, effectively, in those cases, generally, we advise the complainant to go to the police.
Okay.
Because see, stalking is something which, as an internal committee, you will find it difficult to really ensure safety and comfort of a complainant.
True.
And I think if stalking is more of a criminal
Yes.
requirement, or somebody is checking your internet activities.
Exactly. So this law is typically of civil in nature. It does not have any criminal liability. It does not impose any criminal liability on any of the person,
Yes.
including the respondent.
Yeah.
So in serious cases, it is advisable to lodge a police complaint.
Yeah. So basically, I think the organization can support the complainant.
Yeah.
Where they believe that somewhere, see, basically this law is applicable among colleagues, among your contract workers, whosoever work within the premises. Or let's say if a colleague goes into somebody's house for some official work at home in the night, that is also covered, because if it is an official work. But yes, the committee will not be able to offer your comfort outside the workplace. Because of the limitations. It's not that you don't have the right, but I think it's practically difficult for them. There, in such cases, if we believe, or if the complainant believes that there's a safety threat outside, generally the organization advise the complainant to go for a police complaint as well, so that they can have that protection, or the required support from the police in terms of those
So in
actions.
perhaps in severe cases, we should go for a criminal procedure.
See, there is no definition of
Not
severe
severe
cases.
cases.
It is basically purely depend if the complainant feels that there is a threat outside office, or she feels that somebody is stalking her, or somebody is trying to monitor the net activities, something. So if it goes beyond certain requirements or certain thing, where we simply say that if you still believe, or the complainant feel that this guy is calling up from anywhere or different places, etc., and she could figure out it's the same person who's been calling. So in those cases, the organization advise. But will the organization file the case? No. It's an individual who has to decide.
Right.
The organization can support in help and whatever requirement in terms of filing the case. They advise. So they advise the person that if you would like.
person who should decide that.
See, ultimately, even if you look at POSH also, whether the person is willing to raise a complaint has to be her or his decision. Right? So effectively, because finally somebody come and say, okay, I'm okay if you just call and scold, and or maybe talk to this person separately, but I don't want to file an official complaint.
Right.
So
I think in that
effectively-
case, conciliation is the best option, where people
generally
don't want
yes,
to go for.
but I think effectively you will see a lot of cases where people still want a full investigation, or where people are happy with the conciliatory process. I think it works differently.
Okay. So what kind of majority cases you have seen? Like, people prefer going for conciliation more, or they want more towards formal inquiries?
See, I think effectively it's one-off instances, or you felt that somebody said something, you are not happy or okay with it, or somewhere the case has just gone out of hand and you felt trouble with the person particularly. There, I think generally people go with conciliatory.
Okay.
And I think it's the role of the committee to explain, because when a complainant comes and raise a complaint, generally they are not aware. Okay.
Right.
So when you say there's a conciliatory process, so they say, what is a conciliatory process? So does it mean I don't get anything, but I don't get my justice? So I think that's also a situation. But I think effectively it's one-off, or somebody just sent you one on WhatsApp. Okay. So I dreamt this and I sent it to you. But why do you have to share with a female colleague? Okay, it doesn't make sense, right? So in such cases, sometimes, but as I said, the right is available with the complainant. So the committee tries and explain, but if they are okay, they can go for conciliatory. Preferably, lot many people. I think it's a mixture of both the cases. Sometime people go in for conciliatory and say, I want to get over with the process, and then close it out because I'm happy with the apologies. Some complainants will come back and say, I do not want the respondent to lose the job. It's just that I felt uncomfortable, so I felt that there has to be an action, which, or at least an apology, which should be very clearly, he should understand the impact of what has been said.
Right.
And there could be multiple ways you close out a case. You may give a warning letter. So basically, the committee rolls out the report to the HR. Okay. they don't take their actions themselves. So they will advise HR whether a letter should be written to the respondent and put it into his personal file, whether an apology needs to be taken, whether the person needs to go through a formal training or should get into some community service, or there could be some impact on his salary or the increments or something.
Yeah.
So that there could be multiple kind of requirement,
That is
or the
absolutely-
person may need to leave the system.
Yeah.
That is the decision of committee. After
Decision of committee communicated to
communicated
management,
to
because that's why HR is given that another 60 days or something to
Yeah.
take those actions
Okay.
for that cases.
60 days to implement the action of the internal committee.
Hmm.
So, since people are ignorant about this law, it is possible that there is no internal committee. So, according to this law, if there's any incident happened and they haven't formed any internal committee for enforcing this law, then the employer is liable to a penalty which may extend up to 50,000 rupees for the first time. And if it is a repetitive or the second complaint, then in that case the fine is double, as well as there's a threat to the organization that their licenses and trading activities may be put on a hold or it may get cancelled. So it's an alternate which is there in the law. So it is compulsory for all the organization to have this.
Right.
So apart from this, the role of the internal committee, what is more important to understand, what is possible areas where the sexual harassment issues may occur, right? So can you
Yes. So
elaborate
I
more
think
on this?
effectively, as we see that you have a lot of companies off sites, right? People go together, etc. So I
Yes.
think certain pointers we need to keep in mind is that drink sensibly. I think we all know that in the parties and all people drink, that's fine, but drink sensibly. Okay. I think it's also important to see that what you share or what you post on a social media relating to another person, I think we have to be careful on our behavior on the social media, whether it's WhatsApp, Twitter, Insta, or anything, because
Absolutely.
effectively, I think every person has a right to privacy. And I think if that is, obviously, you are one going against the law of privacy. At the same time, I think please manage the behavior of how you should really react on a social media about a person. Okay. I think for the girls, it's important to speak up. I think somewhere, I think people believe that, and especially for the newcomers, I think it's important because sometime when they join an organization, they feel so much pressured. If some supervisor had said something, they said maybe if I revolt too much, my performance may get affected, my things may get affected. But I think speak up. But with the caution, I'm saying that speak up does not mean that even if you don't feel anything, just speak up. So I think it's a small differentiation which people have to say. But speak up and don't stay silent. I think it's important that you raise up the concern. Sometime when we start ignoring, the other person may start believing it's a consent. Okay, so don't spread those signals which gives an impression of being a consent rather than saying I am not happy or I am not acceptable with this behavior. So at least you should make it very clear that what behavior is not acceptable to you. Okay, and ensure that you say that when you say no means no. So effectively, if you don't want to really become friends with a person, it's your choice, right? At the same time, you may decide to be friends, you may decide not to be friends. That's a choice which you carry yourself. Okay. I think in a professional setup, our advice would be that please don't get into too many personal or inappropriate questions to the people. I think it's difficult to say, but generally, sometime when you get into too much into a person, just ensure that is it a friendly relationship. Then obviously it's the comfort that you carry with the friend. But if it's not a friendly relationship, people may not be comfortable talking too much about their personal lives. Okay. But that's a thin line that you should ensure that you are maintaining the decorum and you are ensuring that there is a reasonable thing. Okay. Um, Generally, I think, what does the law say? Law say behave sensibly around women or to women. Okay. So I think the basic fundamental is, if there is something you won't do with your child, you can't do with the others. So I think this is something which we should be able to open up and see that effectively that has to be there.
Right. So I just want to mention one thing, that under this act, only women can make a complaint for unwanted behaviors.
Yeah.
Right. So it is only and only applicable for aggrieved women.
Yes.
So, as far as the duties of the employer is concerned, so there are certain duties which an employer has to ensure that they have to make aware, they have to educate their employees in respect of this. They can do it with with uh, having some trainings, or maybe putting some posters around the workplace, so that even the visitors or the customers with whom they are dealing, they will come forward. So that is another an important aspect, and you can add few more duties of an employer.
Yeah.
Ritu?
So basically, I think a lot of time, all of us want to resolve everything when somebody comes to us with a complaint, right? So I think most of the time, the complainant will go back to the supervisor about what had happened or what are the issues that they had felt. I think my advice would be, please don't try to resolve it yourself. Please raise it to HR or the IC committee, because I think don't resolve and don't get into that. You explain the complainant that there's a section, there's an act, if you would want to go ahead with it. If they believe that it is something of a sexual nature, they should try to resolve it through sending it to HR. They should not try to just start resolving it themselves. The other important thing is, sometime managers will, you've come to with me for a complaint and I'll call the respondent there. So please don't call them in the same room, because I think effectively it's very embarrassing for, I think, both the people to be in the same room and explaining certain context. So effectively, I think don't call them in the same room, and preferably don't try to resolve the issues on your own. Okay, go back to the committee and say that this is the complaint, and then the committee will take course of its action.
So the aggrieved person should first go to the committee and explain the whole.
So basically, the manager can say you can raise a complaint
You can raise a
directly,
complaint.
or if she has raised a complaint to the manager can forward it to the
Forward it
committee.
to the committee.
But the complaint, so see, there are cases where you start taking a suo moto investigation, but mostly I think, because even if you take suo moto, you want somebody to give you evidences, somebody to give you witnesses, somebody to give you explanation, etc. So I think it's for the complainant to take a call. So sometimes she just say that I have this complaint, but if I'm okay, if you can just speak to this person and just say effectively. But if she decides to forward the complaint, I think then it has to be forwarded to the HR and
To the
or
concerned
the
person.
IC committee, or you can tell the complainant they can write directly to
write
the
directly.
harassment committee.
And apart from that, is there any option available to the complainant if they're not happy with the decision of internal committee? What they can do?
See, they can always go outside to the
Of
government.
course.
Matlab basically, effectively, I think sometime, see, not every complaint lands up in the correctness, or not every complaint goes into the non-correctness of the same procedure.
Right.
Effectively, I think the committee tries to keep the all parties involved into the whole process and tries and explain them of certain things, etc. But effectively, at the end of the day, the complainant may not feel happy about it. They can speak to the HR, They can speak to the legal department. They can come back again to the committee saying they're not happy with it, and the committee may try explaining. But even after that, if they do not really feel comfortable about the whole process, they can obviously go back outside and then still uh, raise a complaint outside.
Even under the this POSH Act, they have the option to file an appeal before the tribunal. So, if any aggrieved women and the complainant is not happy with the decision of the internal committee, if they are not satisfied, they can always appeal for that. This is not possible in case of conciliation, but yes, yes, if the conciliation is done and if the complainant is not happy, if the respondent is not taking an action on the decision of the committee based on the conciliation matter, so they can always go for the full-fledged inquiry. Yeah.
So in that cases, complainant should go to tribunal.
And they can file an appeal to the tribunal for this.
Okay.
So that is another option which is available under this law.
See, even the sometime I think even the witnesses fear the repercussions of the law, right? Because complainant want to present some witnesses, or the respondent wants to present some witnesses. So the law provides that the witness has a right to get his or her name masked into the report.
Okay.
So they can come forward, but they can say that I do not want my name to be disclosed. Because I think sometimes they also fear that if it is against a boss or a supervisor, it may be taken negatively on their performance.
Exactly.
So that right is also available to the witness to remain anonymous, or basically you can say witness 1, witness 2, witness 3.
Right.
And the committee sends the complaint to the HR, the whole report to the HR. And the complainant and respondent can obtain a copy of the report, not from the committee, but from the HR.
All right.
Because it's basically committee sends it to them. It's for the HR to give the report out to the employer.
All right. So generally, what kind of like how the inquiries and everything happen in the organization to determine whether the complaint is correct or not correct? Can you just throw some light on this?
Basically, there is a process. Once you set up a committee, generally what you do, you try and meet the complainant, hear out the sequence of events or whatever has happened around the same thing. You meet up with multiple witnesses. You discuss with the respondent. So I think when there are 4 people on the panel sitting talking individually to, let's say, 10 people or 5 people differently, there's a sense which you get out. And I think another word of caution before I come on to that is, a lot of people confuse workplace harassment to a sexual harassment. Okay. So there are 2 different parameters and paradigms which effectively, because sometimes you get a lot of workplace related complaint that my supervisor didn't rank me appropriately because I am not in good terms with him or her. Okay.
Absolutely.
Because that typically is more performance related complaint, effectively how you had worked or what has been your performance parameters. There generally you seek intervention of HR to further it out, etc. So I think basis that once you have met up with the complainant, with the witnesses, etc., you collectively, and then I think once you are meeting with so many people, you try to build up that same sequence of events. So if there's a cross questioning, you have different versions from different people, you know that something is not correct in the whole process. Okay, because effectively generally, or sometimes the complainant is able to produce a lot of evidences in terms of emails or WhatsApp messages or something. So you ask both the people to present any kind of evidences that they have, any witnesses who should be able to corroborate, etc.
Right.
But if it's fairly established, then you go with the complainant's thing, unless it's completely off.
Right.
So effectively, and even if your slightest things had made the complainant uncomfortable, you'll say that this you need to be very careful on certain
Exactly.
requirements, etc.
So have you come across the cases where instead of the complainant, some other person on behalf of complainant filed the complaints to the internal committee?
So basically, not really, but what happens is that when the complainant goes back to the functional supervisor, sometimes they raise a complaint to the supervisor, but the supervisor will go back and check with the complainant, should I forward this to the internal committee?
Okay.
Okay. And sometimes the supervisor, if he's a member of the committee, they also generally send it to the committee that, look, this is what has come in. So would you like to just speak to this person concerned?
Okay.
Just to give that comfort and assurity, because sometime I think when you speak to the person concerned, he said, I just wanted to raise it, but frankly, I do not want to go into the formal process.
Okay.
Because that's also a choice. Sometimes people may not like to get into a formal process. If they says, I'm being heard, they know that that's a problem and you have spoken to certain people around it. So I think it's important to give that comfort to the complainant.
Yeah.
Because if a person believes that she is not heard into the whole process,
She will not get motivated to speak up.
At the same time, there's always that fear and sense of that it's not heard then. So I think the organization plays a very important role by creating their thing to create a safe, ethical workplace in the organization, which is safe for the women. It's ethical way of dealing with the people. So I think you create a lot of awareness sessions. When you see the senior leadership is interested and take things very seriously, I think people also start creating or believing that culture is actually happening. So that really helps in the whole process.
All right.
So, ma'am, I have a question in my mind that what about the organizations which are not having committee?
So, which we said that the complainant, ideally, yes, you can have you should voluntarily have a committee. But if you don't have, there are government portals which are available. You can still raise a complaint outside. You can raise it to HR if HR is able to willing. But if you believe that within the company people are not really listening or not really looking at the heat of it, they can obviously all go outside and then raise a complaint around it.
Okay. So, what kind of questions the committees generally ask from the complainant and the
So basically, I think normally the committee should go through the case well, understand that what has been raised into the case and what kind of issues have been raised around. They should ask, see, there's no defined pattern per se. If I say that, generally they will ask the complainant to re-narrate the incident, what has happened. Just to see, sometimes what you write and what you have gone through, you can easily make it out when somebody re-narrates. So if the re-narration goes a little different every time you ask the person to explain, that itself tells you some part of the story.
Absolutely.
Okay, because you know that is it something which they had said or something which has been just cooked up or something. So effectively, you tell the person to narrate the incident, etc. And what happens is you tell the person that you are being recorded. Nowadays you generally record the proceedings as well.
Right.
So you tell the person that this has been recorded, and a statement is also parallelly made. So one is a complaint which you receive with the complainant. The other is parallelly you start writing what has been said into the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, you get that statement signed from the person that this is what is discussed in the meeting. Okay.
So at least we have a written record of
narration. Narration of what happened on that day of the meeting.
On the day of the meeting.
Because then there are different members on the board who will ask different questions. What happened in this? See, the purpose is to try and understand the complaint better.
Okay.
The main aim is to
basically understand that
exactly complaint.
Because
what
effectively
happened at that
in
moment.
most cases, in some cases you may have WhatsApp or something helping you with the process. But in a lot of cases, you may not really have evidences.
Right.
Okay, so you go by what could have transpired or what really made the person uncomfortable into the whole process.
Exactly.
Since we all are auditors and auditors don't leave their trails themselves, so what happens if witnesses and evidences are not apparently available for such cases?
Yeah. So as I said, I think it's difficult, and as I said that in a lot of cases you won't have evidences. So what you do when you talk to multiple people, you try and compare that how are their statements corroborating. Is it something some person is saying completely different of what really happened? Because effectively, witness could be like there is a social party, let's say, and somebody got drunk and did some action or something. It's a people full of the crowd full of people. Okay, so people would have observed certain behaviors. So when you meet up with three, four people, you try and compare statements that this is saying X, that is saying Y. Is it matching? Is it completely off the track? Is it something which is not completely off what has been raised as a statement? Okay, so you try and look at consistencies or inconsistencies in their statements. You generally try and dismiss rumors. Sometime when it's relating to that there is a discrimination or something, you also reach out to HR. You reach out to even colleagues not connected with the case to try and understand what is the atmosphere of the particular branch or an office.
Okay.
Just to try and see that how you can relate it back to the complaint. So I think you try as best as possible to try and reach to certain scenarios and work out a case.
Is right. So what generally happens is what kind of like the actions which is taken by the internal committee.
Okay, so basically, I think, as I said, effectively, if you believe that the complaint is very serious in nature, and this would have happened to various people into the process, but people have not spoken up earlier, I think generally in those scenarios, you tell the HR that the person may need to really move out of the organization.
Okay.
Because effectively, if it's serious, if it's a regular repeat complaints, I think generally that's what you tell.
It
that
may affect other persons also in that.
yes, and if the person is in position of power, I think it becomes all the more difficult. But if you believe that yes, the person has not behaved responsibly, but I think it should be enough to give a written warning to the person. So you tell, and those warnings actually form part of your personal files. And the committee also tells them that this time it's a warning, but the second mistake you are gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or sometime you say that in addition to the written warning, you might say that you may have to go with the lesser TVPs or the lesser increments. Sometime if you believe that some kind of that compensation may be required, you may do that. So once the committee sends out the things, or you may say that this person may need counseling, because what happens is in certain cultures, I think there is a way you talk to women, which is a very regular part of the process in the audit, in the office culture.
Office culture, yeah.
Where, oh, how are you type. So it's like very normal.
Yeah.
But I think some people may or may not be comfortable with that kind of thing. So sometimes you say there is a need for counseling the way a supervisor deals with the subordinate.
Absolutely true. It is
Because-
really important.
Because sometimes I think you believe it's like a normal regular chat which you are having, or a regular touch you are having, but some people may not be comfortable. So in that case, and I think you keep creating those sensitization sessions within the org. Nowadays, I think there are a lot of e-learning modules available.
Yes, ma'am.
Because a larger organization will go with the e-learning modules, which basically takes you through the whole module to say what is an acceptable behavior, what is a non-acceptable behavior, what you should do, what you should not do. So that all happens in those cases. And if, as we said, that if it is something of a criminal nature, or something which the committee believes that it is not really under their purview, or they will not be able to help the complainant to that extent, they advise the complainant to go to the police and file a complaint. So yeah.
Please.
So I think effectively making comments about or body shaming a person. Oh, you are looking very smart. Oh, you are looking very thin today. These are comments, I think, in a very closed friend circle, maybe person is willing to take that comment. But I think in a general office atmosphere, if you say or comment about a person's private life, oh, you are remarrying again. It's my choice, right? I want to remarry or I don't want to remarry. It's a comment about my private life. So I would not like to that thing. Or you say, oh, sexy. Oh, beautiful. So see, sometimes what happens is, let's say I say, oh, beautiful. Okay. I may not have intended from a sexy nature, but probably your perception is, no, I said, Oh, beautiful. So I think these are
The way
very
of saying.
Subjective
Yeah.
things.
see, because as I
Depends,
said, if I've perceived it to be sexual in nature, I may not feel comfortable. Okay.
Correct. I mean,
Or
if some person is whistling and saying "oh beautiful," so that will sound
that will
something
sound,
harassing.
or just keep staring on a person. So just staring, and
Staring
you
and
you
saying.
feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Somebody is constantly staring me, so I'm not
Yes.
very happy of that person or something. Trying to unnecessarily get close. Hi, how are you? Just bending on your
Bending.
seat or trying to look. And generally they say, keep your eyes still here. Don't make it go down. So I think these are some or physical or making unwarranted requests. So let's say somebody wants to be friendly with you, right?
Yeah.
You said, look, I'm not interested. I'm okay with it. So let's just concentrate on the office. I may again come back to you. The person again says no, which means you are unnecessarily troubling a person. The
Yeah,
person may not be really interested into a friendship kind of a relationship. That's
Absolutely.
fine, but because that person is not interested, so I
Right,
think
right.
don't get into the personal space of a person. Or sometime, let's say there's a group of people standing, and there are boys and the girls, and they're just joking or making jokes, and the guys make a sexual joke. Now the female might get offended because effectively there is a gathering of you may
Right.
take that joke or you may not take that joke.
Absolutely.
So that I think, or sometime I think effectively on your screens putting something offensive. Okay, it's office atmosphere, right? You can't put some sexy lady out there or somebody or a pornography, looking at pornography into the offices or making physical demands. Oh, you do this. Oh, come out to me for dinner. Okay, person says no, I'm not interested. I'll again make a demand. Would you please come for a dinner?
Yeah.
The lady is not comfortable. It's not comfortable. So
Hmm.
I think there are certain things or certain behaviors which ideally we should not do. It's something maybe acceptable within friends, and generally I think that's why a lot of organization, if you say, they have a policy of not getting connected into a physical or a relationship, love relationship within offices. I think the reason is now most of organizations says that if you are into some relationship, it's better to disclose, because I think there are cases when sometimes the relationships may turn sour. Okay.
Yeah.
So till the time the person is in relationship, they are okay. When it turns
Turns
sour,
sour,
it can
cause a
lead to.
problem.
So that's why I think a lot of organizations say it's better to disclose. And sometime when the relationship is between the supervisor and a junior, this may lead to the supervisor by default discriminating to the other people. So they may file because of their closeness. They are not being given their required performance indicators, or they are being discriminated against work.
Yeah. True.
So I think those could be something which we have to be little
And
careful
acceptable
about.
behavior that you earlier discussed. So that term plays a crucial role, and it
Yes.
should be understood by the persons.
Yes, I think there are certain.
There should be a clear understanding of this term, I guess.
Yes, so I think effectively, as we all understand that sexual, I think we females also, I think somewhere are born with the gift of understanding what's acceptable and what not acceptable. So I
Absolutely.
think effectively, if I don't like me get touched by even my male friends or my family also, I may not like father to behave in a particular way. So effectively, why would I would like anybody into the office to touch me to that extent? So effectively, I think there are acceptable behaviors, and I think the males doesn't have to worry about, but it's just that maintain the office decorum. And I think we should just know what's acceptable, what's not acceptable.
Yes.
So that is important.
Yes, it is actually important to understand the what with the girl with whom you are talking, what kind of background or something they have. They have to ensure that the girl should not feel bad about your comment. You may be okay with it, but the girl may not be.
So I think these are effectively, if you actually see, these are just called sensible behaviors.
Exactly.
Matlab, I think though these are, we are trying to explain it into more depth and details, but it's just being sensible,
nutshell,
and
it is a
it's
sensible
a sensible behavior, because I think if you are in a sensible behavior, I don't think so there is a reason for other person to feel bad about it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And effectively, we should be very clear that if somebody has insisted of certain things which they should or should not do, that should be accepted.
So the new entrants, those who are actually the young blood, young girls who are joining office, it is really important for them to understand that what is acceptable and what is not, and they have to be aware of their own rights, and they should also feel courageous to talk about it. As you rightly mentioned in the beginning, that yes, it is important for the girls to talk about what is right, what is wrong, and what they're liking and what they're not liking, because it is not necessarily it's not necessary that whatever is there in the environment is talking about, you have to accept it as it is.
Yes.
So it may not be acceptable, then you have to actually have a say.
And I think for the girls also, sometime effectively, we tend to take things and ignore. Okay. The challenge is sometimes you pass out a signal that you are okay with this kind of a behavior. So I think there some kind of a default lies with us also, because effectively we are also complimenting a behavior by not saying that it's not acceptable. So, sometime by not reacting to a behavior, you are giving a person that it's okay to put a shoulder around my arm or put an arm around my shoulder, so it's okay. But if you say, look, I don't like being touched like this, so you have to present their thing. So, effectively, it should not come out as a consent, because sometimes in certain cases, the person says that I never felt that she was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So it's good to just spill out of that. It's not, you would not encourage that kind of a behavior, or you do not like certain kind of a behavior. So the person also knows that yes, it's not an acceptable behavior. It's important.
And it is one has to remember something has to happen for the first time, so you have to speak at least for the first time.
Yes.
So there's always you have to ensure.
Yeah. And I think hear out the complainant well, understand, don't interrupt, don't try to dissuade, because I think effectively there is actually a lot of courage required to come up and speak out your audio, if whatever it is. So I think don't dissuade the complainant. Listen out with an open mind and get a detailed descriptions. Do not try to give your judgments out. Just hear out and try and understand. Give that comfort to the complainant that you are being heard. There is a process. Things will work out. We will see how we can do and support you into the whole process. And same time, make them clear that look, this is a process, because sometimes people also come out and say that can you close it in the next 1 week. It can't be. There is a process. You will meet up. So there's a timeline window, etc.
Right.
Okay. And as we am again saying that this law is based on the perception of the complainant, not the intent of the respondent. Okay. So sometimes the respondent may not really say certain things from the way it looks like, but sometimes it is interpreted that ways.
It's true. Right. Mansi.
So, ma'am, I want to ask a question that what is the main, I think main role is of employer to understand the complainee and, be with him so that he's comfortable in the environment and to maintain decorum of the environment.
Yes.
So, I would like you to please elaborate. So, what are the duties of employer?
So, as I said, I think as a duties of the employer, one effectively is to treat it with handle and care.
Okay.
And effectively, the complaints committee is generally very independent of the management, because it
Right.
is a complete independent committee, and they have complete freedom to do what they want to do in the whole process. And from a committee perspective, because it's also a committee formed by the company, they keep the things completely confidential. They keep the things completely aligned to among themselves. At the same time, the all rules and requirements are told to the complainant, to the respondent. And I think most of the time, you actually see that the spread is done by the parties. aggrieved parties by
Right.
talking to
Exactly.
multiple people
By
into the
talking to
system.
multiple.
So,
That's
Absolutely.
effectively, because then you can't blame the committee that they had actually done that.
Right.
So effectively, I think you maintain the confidentiality, give those interim reliefs, whether to the respondent or the complainant, at least remove their reporting relationship, because a person cannot be in a reporting relationship and at the same time facing a complaint, because by then the respondent would also have got the complaint.
Yeah, true.
So they know who's raised a complaint. And I think the other important part is that though we say that you also take anonymous complaints, but generally the committee write backs to the complainant to bring out the name, etc., because for them to uh, what would you really inquire into a complaint if it's
Exactly.
anonymous, because it has happened to a particular person.
Right.
True.
Okay, so unless you really corroborate with that person, it's difficult to really follow that complaint through. So you write back to the complainant that please come forward and please explain and tell us what needs to be done. So that is there, which has to be checked. Secondly, I think, as we said, that this POSH law is not only applicable to the employee, it is applicable to the people working for the organization, be it vendors, be it third parties, be it contractors. So if it happens in your workplace, in the interactions into your workplace, or your employees interacting into a social circuit, or a official, not a social circuit, official circuit, and he gets into a response to somebody, and the person has felt uncomfortable, they can also raise, because it's my employee attaching or covering a official event.
Right. Right.
So that is also there. So
And also, I think the employer roles get crucial in organizations on whom POSH is not applicable.
yes,
That
it
means
is.
where it is not mandatory to form a internal committee. So in that case, I think role of employer gets more crucial, because to maintain environment of organization and discipline, in that way.
Yes.
As far as this internal committee is concerned, management is not a part of it at all, because all the minimum four members, which is prescribed by the law, it constitute all three employees and one external member. So management is independent and the committee is independent of management. So biasness from the management will not flow into this. So it is a very crucial and important thing which the law has kept in this, that it has to be by the employees only, for the employees and by the employees.
And it is actually effectively, if you see, generally the committee is chaired by a very senior executive into the system. The purpose is that there is a seniority, and at the same time there is a complete independence. Because finally the committee's decision is the decision which they will communicate it to the management. Okay, and that decision, once communicated, the HR will have to come back. So that independence is fairly established into the system. But I think it's important for the listeners to ensure that the companies do set up their policies who have employees of more than 10 or more. Create awareness, because I think in a larger organization or even in a smaller organization, how many of us would really know what is POSH? Okay. I think at least in the International Women's Day, we can take a pledge that at least we read it out, we go through these sections and see what rights and what things are available. And whether it's, and I think a lot of CA firms or law firms or a lot of these firms which operate needs to review their employee situation and have a policy, because we all know that there's a gender diversity. More and more females are coming up. There is a lot of them have accomplished into their field. Our finance minister, she's a woman of substance and thing. So there are so many women on the field, and they are creating a lot of milestones, as I would say.
Yeah.
And this is something which is available for the safety of women, which is available for their protection. And I think it's important for all women out there to please go back, read, get themselves aware of what the rights they have. But at the same time, please don't misuse it. This is meant for the protection of the
And
women.
not just
And I think it's meant for the awareness of the right and the wrong behavior. I think from the beginning, we keep teaching our children, we keep teaching our people. I think everybody is taught, there's a sex education now happening in the schools and colleges.
Right.
What is acceptable, what is not
Not
acceptable, what touch is acceptable, what touch is not acceptable.
Exactly.
I think if we do some of these role models to our real life in the office atmosphere, etc., the life is, people are clear, right? So this is something. And Sana, would you like to tell something that in terms of IIA, Institute of Internal Audit, what support is available to the women out there, or how do you really help the members of the organization or the other people to get insights into this act or the sections?
Yes. So, as part of Institute of Internal Auditor, in Women's Circle, we are holding some mentoring session because it is really important to have a mentoring session for girls, especially because they are the one who have to take the leadership positions in future. So uh, we are also talking about POSH and other respective areas which is affecting women's, those especially who are into internal audit function, and those who are working with big organization. They are facing a lot of issues, and they are coming back with their queries and how to make work life easy. So such kind of questions we keep on receiving, and we are organizing sessions, and especially dedicated mentoring sessions for that, to overcome such issues and helping them to grow. So the ultimate objective is to take the women to the leadership position.
So just putting a question to you, Mansi, are you a member of IIA?
But I would love to be a part of this after attending this webinar.
No, I think as Sana said, IIA is this, especially the Delhi chapter, Women Delhi chapter. This is the first time a women chapter has come into the Institute of Internal Auditors, which was primarily earlier dominated by male members. Now I think there has been a focus of more inclusion, and this chapter really helps in terms of helping women. Managing work-life balance, creating a lot of awareness sessions, be it POSH, be it Companies Act, or a lot of other sections and acts they keep creating.
Yeah.
So it has technical help, it has the behavioral or the skill sets. So I think there's a lot of help available to the women out there, and to see that uh, this chapter is available specifically for catering to the needs of the women. So I think would advise a lot of members. You'll really find it worthful to be a part of it. I think it should really
Yes.
help us all out there, and I think it will help you both professionally as well as personally in terms of how you really move forward. And because especially the young women getting into the field will have a lot of issues in terms of balancing or taking care of the children or something, etc.
That's true.
Right.
So, Mansi, would you have any more questions around there? How would you?
Ma'am, I would like to ask that if a complainee wants to go for informal mode on conciliation, so what are the remedies available to him or her?
When you
Sorry,
say
her.
informal mode, can you just elaborate a little bit?
Means I'm asking that what are the informal mode of going for conciliation? Are there any
So
informal modes?
basically, as I said, that not necessarily you have to raise a complaint. Okay, so if you go back to your supervisor and you have a concern, sometimes see, it's okay. Sometimes a simple concern you can raise it to the functional head. The functional head independently speaks to the respondent without naming you, saying that we've noticed certain kind of a behavior, and I believe if you can just mend your behavior, it's not something which people around you may like. So the confidentiality is maintained, the person is given a warning, and the person is okay. So I'm saying those rights are in any case always available, because this is only a forum for a formal mechanism. If you believe it's gone beyond water, I know I still want to, I'm not happy with what my functional supervisor has done. I want to go further. But sometimes it does happen, and as I said, sometimes it's a very thin line. It's not really a sexual harassment, but you felt uncomfortable. Okay, so it could be maybe workplace related or something like that. So you can always go back to, if you believe you do not want to go to functional head, you may go to HR.
Okay.
Because HR is a neutral person. Okay, so you can reach out to HR. But if you believe nobody is hearing you or nobody is trying to do, then you still
Then
have an option to
to
raise
go for
out a
formal
complaint and
conciliation.
raise it out into the process.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. You can continue.
So effectively, I don't know
If
whether
we
we
have to sum up this session,
Hmm.
so what we have seen is that yes, POSH is there, the law, formal law is there, other options are also available, and in this law, there it as it is divided into three parts: the prevention, then redressal. The prevention, prohibition, and redressal. So we have three different aspects. One is to go into a informal conciliation, then a formal inquiry, and maybe to a police complaint if it is so necessary.
So basically, I think if you just summarize the whole
Hmm.
stuff,
Hmm.
there is a POSH policy and guideline which is put it into the place.
Hmm.
Any organization having 10 or more employees across branches or something has to constitute an internal committee. For each branch, you need to have a regional committee if it's 10 or more. Okay. The complainant has two options to go for: a conciliatory process or a formal process. Okay. In a large organization, the committee may comprise of multiple members, and when the complaint is received, the committee is formed of at least minimum four members. Choose from that, wherein the chair is done by the most senior executive, who's defined into the chairperson of that committee, and also attended by one of the lawyer or the representative of that committee. So two procedures: conciliatory, where an apology, or you talk to the complainant, you talk to the respondent, and there is a conciliatory mechanism where you seek an apology and you give the resolution to both complainant and respondent within 15 days, and you close out the process. In the formal investigation mechanism, there is a 90-day window period which has been given, wherein you will speak to complainant, witnesses, the respondent, you pull out a report, you discuss the requirements, look at the statements, raise it out to HR, and the HR will take the actions accordingly. In generally in the single complaints, you give a warning or the letter to the person or do a counseling, but repeated non-compliances, repeated non-issues, etc., can lead to issues around the process. For the company also, repeated non-compliances can lead to penalties and fines, and even the cancellation of licenses. There are some provisions for malicious charges, etc. Effectively, it's always difficult to prove, but there are provisions around that.
Yeah.
There needs to be the regular training awareness sessions within the organizations. You can organize trainings for your committee members, trainings for your workers, trainings for your senior level executives separately, trainings for your general masses. You should have, if it's a large organization, I would advise you should have some e-learning modules set up where people can go and take a e-learning, because it will have some examples, situations of what is acceptable, what is not acceptable.
Right.
You display posters time to time at the office's main centers, so that even the people who are outside from the system can read it out, can know that what the rights are, where they can raise a complaint, etc. There are compensation mechanisms, and as a preliminary measure, the complainant, the reporting relationships have to be changed between the complainant and the respondent. And you can provide complainant with the leave options, which is with pay. As per the law, you can give that compensations. And your steps would be to as much as minimize the conflict of interest. So effectively, let's say if you receive a complaint from a department and that department member is also a part of the committee, okay, you would not really keep that member on the committee, because I think if the complainant believes that my complaint is being heard by a person who is part of my department, she may not feel comfortable, and it could be also a conflict of interest, because there may be a bias towards that work, or there may be a reference towards that work. So you should avoid the conflict of interest in the situation. And there could be warnings, there could be situations where an employee may be asked to go. And I think we have all seen Me Too era. Okay.
Yeah.
So there, I think in the Me Too era, a lot of issues of the previous past have also come in. So I think the organization is well aware, the atmosphere is well aware of the issues, and I think we all would have heard about the Harvey Weinstein case where he's been now accused of sexually harassing certain employees. And with the influential, it does take time, but I think a lot of witnesses have come in, the protections have been granted to them. So there are a lot of provisions available. There are sections available for the women's safety. I think our whole government is working towards women's safety. But if you see from the government angle also, a lot of women's safety initiatives have been taken. You will have CCTV cameras installed at multiple places. You have most of the organizations during their transport also, they put a female member or the guard to be dropping the last female back home. So I think I would say that the word is safe. You have your rights available. You should just know what the rights are. And I think if we all behave or we have our sensible behaviors in place and we have all understood the law and act well, I think no need to worry for everyone to be out there and do their best in their fields what they do.
Ma'am, we're having some questions from viewers, so can we discuss that question?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, so ma'am, question by a viewer is that what if the employer does not facilitate the POSH committee at workplace? So in case, what will be the consequences?
See, basically, the one is the organization itself is liable to be prosecuted for that.
Okay.
And nowadays, there is a requirement to file all the big organizations or 10 plus. I think they're also building up their databases. You will find the notices coming from them that their annual report has not come. Even if you have to file a nil report, you still have to say no cases filed, no complaints done. It not only asks the complaints, it's also asked whether complaint completed within 90 days window. And if it is not done, the complainant can go back and raise a complaint to the government officials. But the organization cannot afford to not file, not have a committees.
Reporting is now done mandatory for some organizations.
Yes.
So can you explain what are those organizations on whose reporting is mandatory?
See, all the big organizations, like Procter Gamble, Z News, Times of India. So, lot of, I think, any big organ, I'm saying it's talking about only 10.
10.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
okay.
10 is a very,
So 10
very
is a
nominal number.
Okay.
So it is mandatory, right? Now, if people do not constitute, so for example, you have tax to be deducted on certain things. If you don't deduct, it's an offense.
Yeah.
So if company do not form, it's an offense they are committing.
Okay.
And in this case, I would like to add that the penalty is up to 50,000 for the first
First
issue
offense,
and then later
if
it is
repetition,
doubled.
then it would be doubled. Right?
Yes.
You explained earlier also
Yeah.
this one. So, okay. Do we? Second question is that do we have to form a committee at all the workplaces? I think we have already discussed this.
So when you say at all workplaces, to the extent you have branches or references where you have 10 or more,
10 or more.
you need to have a committee. So, for example, you can have a corporate and a regional structure. I think it's also good from a traveling perspective also because people are around there. But in any case, if you have a committee, so now I think even you have the requirement to file reports for each state.
For each state, yeah.
So there is, I think, the government is also making the law more and
Government
more
also going strict on this
strict
applicability
on
of
this
this law.
applicability on
So
this
the
law.
basic requirement is 10 or more persons if a organization is having. So it is mandatory to file to
have a
form a internal committee.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So moving on to the next question, that whether the organization is liable for all misconduct or harassment happened even after the working hours.
After the working hours, if it's purely social gathering you are attending, the organization is not responsible. And as I said, that let's say you are an organization where you may need to attend late night events or may need to cover certain things in the evening. That's working.
Okay.
Because if you're going
that is
officially for a duty or officially covering something at late night or after working hours, because some organization may work 24 hours a shift.
Yeah.
So what is before or after? So it's basically
depends
that
on the policy of the organization.
not really policy, depends upon the work.
Working hours of
Working,
employee.
one is working hours.
Hmm.
Secondly, sometime you may need to attend let's say, a business meeting outside office after
Okay.
office hours.
Okay.
It's a business meeting, it's
Okay.
related to work.
So it
Okay,
will
but
also
if
get
you
included.
decide to go out with your friend
Hmm.
after working hours,
So that
then
will not
it's
be covered.
that's
Yeah,
a
that's
friend,
true.
right?
Yes. So business work and basically the
Anything to do with
related
business,
to business
related,
will be
whether
included in
it's
this.
within office, within working hours or outside working hours, if you are on work,
It
it's
should
covered.
be related to business.
It should be related to work.
Work. Okay. So moving on to our next question, that we've already discussed this, I guess, that what are the major steps to be taken by employer under this act?
So as I said, I think major steps is create awareness, have a policy, try to put it on your company's website, etc., or something. Do trainings for the employees, and create a ethical working environment within the organization. Create a culture where women feel safe. Create awareness through e-learning modules, through trainings, through organizing workshops, practical classrooms, etc. So that's how you can do that, and be independent and be transparent to the employees.
It's true. So moving on to the next question, what if the complaint filed turn out to be malicious? So in that case, what will be the further process?
Would you like to address? So I think effectively, as I think during my session I said that it's very difficult to really say whether it's malicious or not, because normally I think in the POSH scenario, the complaint generally, what with my experience I've seen, is either it's a workplace harassment or it's a sexual harassment. Okay, or it may be a slightly cuss line between the two. So generally, it's not really a malicious per se, because if it's really malicious, but yes, if you really find it completely malicious, you warn the complainant. It's again one warning. The second time again you find in a similar situation, so it's the same repercussions applicable to the complainant also.
So understanding of malicious will be a very crucial thing in this case.
So it's the same thing, that if you're trying to harm somebody's reputation just by putting a false incident. See, here the issue is effectively, if you see the whistleblower complaints, they can turn out to be more malicious than the sexual harassment complaint. But the sexual harassment complaint can actually be a workplace harassment complaint. So that you will not call it malicious. It's just that the person has not understood the difference between the two.
Absolutely.
So, so effectively, yes, but if you still find that it's really malicious, you warn the complainant once, that if it's repeated again, you will also face the repercussions.
So, moving on to our next question, that is, what about the confidentiality of complaint? So, as you have already we have discussed this, that confidentiality is very important.
Yes. So effectively, as we said, there is a separate email ID created for this complaint, which is only accessible by the chairman or the particular members of the committee. So one, that itself maintains that confidentiality. Plus the entire proceedings, as a rules, you have to lay down to the complainant as well as the witnesses as well as the respondent, that anything which is discussed within this room remains in this room. Okay, so these rules are set as far as, so effectively this is support. The committee needs to maintain a complete confidentiality, and as I also said, that the witnesses also have an option either ways. If they are okay, they can disclose their names. If they do not want their names to be disclosed, that again is kept confidential. So the confidential remains a basic premise of the
because
whole
it
process.
will motivate complaint.
Yeah, because that's required as per the law also, because you are supposed to maintain
that is the basic requirement.
Yes,
for
you are
a
supposed to maintain the confidentiality.
So I think
Even as a chartered accountants, we are supposed to maintain confidentiality
for the client.
So we have to ensure this in IC
for
as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So our last question for the webinar would be that how much time is required to complete the inquiry? We have discussed this. Sana ma'am has already told.
Yes,
so
it is
can you
90
just
days.
Summarize it.
Yeah. So it is 90 days from the date of the date when the complaint was filed. The inquiry has to be completed. Then in next 10 days, the whatever inquiry has been done, the decision has to be communicated to the employer, and then next 60 days the employer has to implement that decision.
Okay.
So overall, it's 90 plus 10 plus 60.
So it is around 160 days to complete the
Yes.
whole process.
Yes.
Right.
But including action.
Including action,
Whole
right?
process is
Yes.
for 160 days.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would like to thank Ritu ma'am and Sana ma'am they have guided us on this whole act, and I will thank viewers also for watching this video.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And thanks to Vivek Khurana ji for organizing this event on International
Women's Day.
Women's Day. Wish you all a very happy Women's Day.